What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's my team selection for Game Week 17. Obviously, we have unlimited transfers for this game week, so I'm going to show you how the squad is looking, but I'm also going to go through the latest double game week news, because it is possible that more double game weeks are announced for the next 3 to 5 weeks, and I want to show you how that has affected the draft that I'm currently on. So if you enjoyed the video, give it a like, hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already, and let's quickly talk about our sponsor. So I'm happy to say that this video has been sponsored by Fantasy5, a game that I've been playing since it came out a couple of years ago, and I know that you'll enjoy it too for a few reasons. It's completely free to play, very easy to pick up, and there's £10,000 up for grabs for the winner. You just need to be 18 or over, and if you want to sign up, there is a link in the description below. So the rules are simple. Just pick 5 players from 5 different matches, and if they all beat their fantasy points target, you'll win the jackpot. And that jackpot has already been won 6 times since the game launched, and given that you're all FPL managers watching this video, the point scoring system is very familiar, so it's very easy to pick up and play. And then you can just apply your FPL knowledge to make your picks. So you can see here that Callum Wilson's got a points target of 6.5, so he just has to get 7 or more to hit his target, and you've got to do that for 5 players. So I'm going to pick Wilson for this game. For Villa versus Liverpool, I'm just going to back my man and go for Mo Salah, bearing in mind that Emi Martinez will probably miss the game for Villa because of his World Cup exploits. For Arsenal versus West Ham, it's probably an Arsenal player between Saka, Odegaard and Martinelli. Odegaard's put up some really good numbers so far this season, and his points target is a little bit lower, so that's who I'm going to go for there. Then I'm going to go for Mason Mount versus Bournemouth, and for Man United, it's between Martial and Rashford. I think there's a chance that Rashford will make my FPL squad, so I'm going to back Anthony Martial in this game instead and go for him, and then you've just got to confirm your selection. It's as easy as that. And that's it. Super simple, completely free to play with a £10,000 jackpot. Just click that link in the description below to get your team entered. If you're outside of the UK and Ireland, you can still play. There's a second link in the description where you can get signed up for a £2,500 jackpot. You just need to be 18 or over and make sure that you gamble responsibly. Otherwise, good luck for this week. So before we get into the draft, let's talk about the potential double game week news. Just a couple of things. One, if you're not already following Ben on Twitter, make sure that you do. His handle is @BenKrellin, always posting lots of useful information about blanks and double game weeks in particular. And 2, this is not 100% guaranteed, right? These are predictions based on how the Premier League usually work, where there are free midweeks and stuff like that, okay? So it's not 100% guaranteed, but it's worth thinking about when you're building your draft, not necessarily for the players you put in right now, but where you may need to transfer players in later on, right? So as you can see here, it's likely that Brighton will get a double game week in game week 21. Therefore, do you put Brighton players in now, or do you have a plan to get them later, or do you just go without them altogether? So that's a couple of things just to mention first of all. So Ben says that 3 fixtures can move to game week 21. Brighton versus Palace, Arsenal versus Everton, and Bournemouth versus Brighton. He thinks that Brighton versus Palace is most likely to move to game week 21 because of how the other fixtures are working in 22, but he does say that it's possible for all 3 of those fixtures to move to game week 21, which will give Brighton a triple game week. Now, we don't get triple game weeks that often where one team plays 3 fixtures within a game week, but it did happen with Man United either last season or the season before. One thing to note is, if that happens and the fixtures are in very quick succession, I'm not sure they'll be as bad as they were for Man United. It is unlikely that players will start all 3 games, but if it looks likely that Brighton are going to get a double at least, then we need to start thinking about whether we put their players in our draft right now or we transfer them in down the line. Or you can completely ignore them, but you need to think about it when you're building your Game Week 17 draft. So there are 3 possibilities. He did go on to say about, I think it's, let me just bring this one up first. Someone asked him about how likely it is that Arsenal versus Everton gets put into Game Week 21. And he said 70 to 80%. Obviously, this is a prediction, somewhat guesswork as well, based on things that have happened in the past. But that sounds pretty good to me, and I already quite liked Arsenal players even without a double in 21, so this puts them up a little bit for me, and they also have that double which is already locked in for game week 23 as well, so that's worth noting. There is one more, or a couple more teams that could have another double, and that is Liverpool and Chelsea, right? So if Liverpool lose to Man City this week in the EFL Cup, which hasn't been played at the time of recording, what do you think the chances are that Chelsea and Liverpool gets moved into Game Week 21? So somebody asked Ben that question, and he said there are reasons why Chelsea versus Liverpool might not move to either midweek in Game Week 21. So it's possible, but he doesn't think it's very likely. I guess for a lot of us, we're going for Chelsea players anyway, because they got good single game week fixtures and a double in Game Week 19. So if you're going to do that, you don't necessarily need to worry about whether they have another double, because if they do, you'll have their players anyway. But Liverpool is interesting because I've only got one Liverpool player in my draft, but I might think about how I could get 2 or maybe even 3 if they were going to double. But it is against Chelsea anyway, and it is unlikely. So that fixture in particular is not really playing on my mind too much when I build my draft. Really, the main ones are these ones. Will Arsenal get a second double? Will Brighton get a double or even a triple? They are the things that I'm taking into consideration when I build my draft. So I don't know when they're going to get announced, or even if they will. Whether or not it'll be before Game Week 17 is hard to know, because obviously there's EFL Cup matches tonight on Thursday, and then it's getting very close to Christmas. So they did do a late announcement last year, because I remember recording videos on Christmas Eve because we got late double game week news. That may well happen again. So we'll just have to keep an eye out, but just keep this in mind when you're building your drafts. Okay, so let's look at the things that have changed since the last draft. So before I was saying that the only goalkeeper combinations I was really looking at was Kepa and Danny Ward, or Danny Ward and Everson. And as you can see, I've got neither of those combinations. I've got Kepa and Sanchez based on that double game week news that I just talked about. Now with Kepa, it's a little bit annoying because Chelsea played a behind closed doors friendly, and we got some information from that game, but we didn't get the lineup as far as I know. We don't know how many minutes every player played. We know that Havertz scored a hat-trick, Reece James played 60 minutes, and I think Mason Mount missed out because of a calf strain, but I don't know which goalkeeper started and how many minutes they got. But given that Kepa seemed to be first choice under Potter before the World Cup break, I'm hoping that is still the case. And he's only 4.5 million. The single game week fixtures are nice. He's got a double game week in 19, an outside shot, and another one in 21. He just seems worth taking a risk on. And given that there is potential for Brighton to get a double game week, possibly even a triple game week, and if they do get that, the one player you'd bet on starting all 3 games is the goalkeeper. I've also gone for Sanchez. He's not that much more than Danny Ward to get another double game week keeper. And you know me, I like going for double game week players. I think a lot of the times people underestimate them. But also, we're in a position where we've basically got another wild card right now that we don't usually get, that we can prepare for these double game weeks we've got announced and the ones that might get announced. And then if it all goes wrong, or if more double game weeks are announced later, which they will be because there's still way more fixtures to rearrange, we have another wild card to sort that out. So it feels like if I can get double game week players in now, then I should probably do that. I should also say I'm not completely ruling out going for Ederson, and it's kind of like a domino effect. So I had Darwin Nunez in my last draft, and I'll talk about my forward line as we get to it later on, but he's not in this draft, and obviously that has freed up quite a bit of money, and that's just a domino effect of where to spend it elsewhere. And right now I've only got 0.1 in the bank, so I don't have enough to get up to Ederson, but I think it is doable if I possibly drop Kieran Trippier, which I'm not saying I will do, but I am considering it. And we know that Man City have got a double game week, I think it's in 20 and 23. They've got a great defence, and obviously Ederson is nailed on and going to play every single game and get 90 minutes as well. And you can't necessarily say that about a lot of other Man City players. It would block me off from going for Foden or De Bruyne, and I'll talk about that in a minute as well. But he is another goalkeeper that I'm considering. But right now I'm on Kepa and Sanchez. Cancelo is staying because of all those things I've just talked about with Ederson. He's about as nailed on as you're going to get for a defender. Yes, he hasn't been as attacking this year. His expected goal involvement numbers are down compared to last season. But at any point they could go up because we know how good he is. And I just think Man City plenty of chance for clean sheets over the next few weeks. So he's definitely locked in as well. And then Reece James is pretty much locked in. If he got 60 minutes in that friendly, I'm confident that he'll start against Bournemouth. Like I've said in previous videos, the turnaround or the rest time for Chelsea between their 3 fixtures in 17, 18 and 19, at least the first one in 19, are pretty good. So I think there's every chance if he can not pick up another injury, he'll play at least 2 of those those fixtures, hopefully all 3. So he's pretty much locked in for me. Just on the bench, the other 2 defenders. So I've got Ben White, because he's only 4.7 million, so he's the cheapest way into that Arsenal team. They did play a fixture in the Carabao Cup, I think it was, and he did start. So I'm not really too concerned about Tomiyasu, for example, taking a huge amount of minutes off of him. So he is like the cheapest way into the Arsenal defence. What I will say, especially if it gets announced before Game Week 17 deadline, if Arsenal are going to double twice, once in 21, once in 23, given that they've got really good numbers from an attacking potential and a defensive kind of perspective as well, I really do want to try and get up to Gabriel, because I just think he is a better option than Ben White. He's much more... I wouldn't say he's more attacking necessarily from open play, because obviously Ben White playing as a fullback is going to get forward for those assists. But Gabriel is a real threat from set pieces, and I think he probably is worth spending the 0.5 million on. Now that gets very tricky about where to get that money from, because as you'll see from the rest of the draft later on, there's not too many downgrades that I want to make. So Kieran Trippier could be the fool guy. I could come right down in price to either get Edison in or get Gabriel in, or try and do both of those things. So that's what I'm thinking right now. I think for me, just really quickly on Trippier, I bought him for 5.6 million. So if I sell him, it's for 5.7. It's almost a little bit easier to make that decision, or at least even consider selling him when you've paid more for him. For a lot of you, you'll have only paid 5 million, and there's just no reason to sell at all. But obviously Newcastle, no double game weeks on the horizon or anything like that. Yes, he has been super consistent. He's been brilliant, and I may be making a mistake by even thinking about getting rid of him, but he could be the full guy for this team, because I think Gabriel is just worth the extra 0.5 million over Ben White. And just obviously I've got Dunk in there as well as another Brighton option that's pretty much nailed. And also, just really quickly, Brighton have got some pretty nice fixtures. Like, okay, before the potential double in 21, they've got to play Liverpool and Arsenal, but they're cheap enough that I can bench those players. And if I'm going to keep them longer term before that second wild card, or I guess the third wild card, kind of, they've got nice fixtures from like Game Weeks 22 all the way up until like 27, even 28, 29. You wouldn't completely back against them to do well there. So if I need an option off the bench, bearing in mind we could get injuries and stuff after the World Cup break and things like that, then Dunk is a pretty solid option just to have on the bench to call upon when needed. So yeah, things have changed a little bit. Cancelo, James, Trippier and Kepa are always in there, but I've got Ben White, I've got Sanchez, I've got Dunk, and Trippier may go. Only may though. Okay, so coming on to the midfield, and I want to talk about a player that I don't own first of all, and that is Almiron, because he's a huge topic of conversation. Lots of people are worried about not having him. I've seen plenty of comments on my videos about why I haven't put him in and stuff like that. And I want to go on the record to say that for 5.8 million or below, he's probably the best midfielder, right? I think most people would agree on that. You could say that if Brighton have a double game week, maybe Gross and McAllister, for example, become options as well. But right now, I would say it's probably Almiron. And if he does keep on doing what he did before the World Cup break in terms of how much he was scoring and stuff like that, then he's easily comparable to like 6.5 million midfielders, 8 million midfielders and stuff like that. But when I think about the 4 midfielders I want to pick for my squad, because I've got Andreas taking up that bench spot, I can just think of way more than 4 midfielders that I would rather have in ahead of Almiron. And it's not really a price thing for me. Like, if I thought there was a massive upgrade that I could make elsewhere, and doing Saka to Almiron was worth it, then I would do that. But I don't think it's worth that sacrifice for the midfielders that I have chosen. So that is why I don't have him. Like, I know I've talked about possibly getting Edison and possibly getting Gabriel for White, but I think there's better downgrades I can make elsewhere than with my midfielders. So that's why I don't own him. And again, I know people are super worried about that and stuff, like they don't have him in their squad. And again, he's a good option, but you can't own everyone. And I think with no double game week or anything on the horizon, he's just, honestly, he's not really even a consideration for me. So that's why he's not in my team. Let's concentrate on the 4 players that I have picked. So Martinelli is going to stay. I always kind of said it would be difficult to let him go because I've got value built up on him. It's not even just that. He is just a great option. And I think one thing I have to keep reminding myself of, and look, Arsenal may not be able to keep this up over the whole season, but right now they are putting numbers up in terms of attack and defence that are very similar to Man City. And if you had a nailed on, remember that, right? Nailed to pretty much start every single game, Man City attacker for 6 million like Martinelli is, you'd absolutely have him in your team. And I just think, even though the fixtures are not necessarily great on paper, like from Gameweek 17, 18, 19, they are a very attacking side. So the teams they're having to play against are going to have to defend really well. I just can't give up Martinelli. And plus, if they do double in 21, and then they've got that other one in 23, I don't want to mess around with losing value on him and having to use transfers on him and stuff like that. So he is pretty much locked in my squad. I've put Saka back in instead of Mason Mount because of that calf strain issue. If Graham Potter says that Mason Mount is okay, I may put him in ahead of Saka, because if we think about the way the fixtures fall, I've got to bring the Chelsea players up here. They've got 17 and 18 are obviously the two really nice fixtures, Bournemouth at home, Forest away, and then it's that double game week, Man City at home and Fulham away. Now, again, that double game week is not necessarily amazing. Anytime you have to play Man City is difficult, but I'm always willing to kind of take that risk on a double game week player, especially when the fixtures either side are pretty good. But it could just be the case that I get Mason Mount for this period, and then I switch to Saka. If Saka's going to double in 21 and 23, and obviously we already know that 23 double is locked in, then I could just look to get him later on instead. I'm a bit conscious that I don't really have too many pre-planned transfers, but I also want to make sure that my squad is pretty solid, that I'm not scrambling for double game week players later on. So if Mason Mount is fit and available, I may just go for him over Saka and get Saka later on. But if not, I think Saka is my favoured 8 million player. I know Spurs have got a double game week, but I don't think it's that great. There's not rumours, but I think there's Conte says something about Son, that he might have to be managed and stuff like that. I'm just not sure about Spurs. Perisic is going to be missing at the start and things like that. I know Doherty's doing really well in the friendlies from that left wing back position, but I'm not that interested in Kulusevski. Foden could be an option as well. But realistically, right now, I think I'm only choosing between Saka and Mason Mount. I am going to go for Salah instead of De Bruyne. Again, I could switch to De Bruyne later on. I don't want to leave myself too many transfers to do, but I just think when I look at the fixtures for the next 3 game weeks, I prefer Liverpool's just about, I think, to Man City. So Villa away, Leicester at home, Brentford away. And obviously Man City have got Leeds away, Everton at home, Chelsea away. So they're fairly comparable, but I keep looking at Salah versus De Bruyne, and all the numbers in terms of expected goal involvement are very similar, but Salah is geared towards goals rather than assists. Salah is on penalties, and you could even say his minutes are slightly better. I do think De Bruyne will just start all of those games, so I wouldn't be worried about that. But on paper, apart from the fact that De Bruyne continues to outscore him, I think Salah's the better option. So I'm going to go for him, and then maybe look to bring in De Bruyne later on. But what is worth noting, how many have I already said that a lot in this video? Possibly. If Liverpool do get that double in 21 with that Chelsea game, and obviously then the other option is to get De Bruyne in for game week 20, I probably wouldn't use a transfer to go Salah to De Bruyne back to Salah. I'd probably just keep Salah and maybe look to get a third Man City player in elsewhere. And that is another reason that I'm thinking about Ederson. So I think Salah will make the squad. I know lots of you said that anyway when I talked about De Bruyne. I have given him genuine thought, but I just don't think he's someone I want to go for straight away in Game Week 17. And then the other position that's changed is Trossard in for Rashford. Now, again, I'm still not 100% sure about that, because I do want to target those next 3 fixtures for Man United. So again, I could go for Rashford, keep the money in the bank, and then get Trossard in. But the problem then is, I'm talking about, okay, I could go for Mason Mount, then switch to Saka. I could go for Salah, then switch to De Bruyne. I could go for Rashford, then switch to Trossard. And that's 3 booked transfers already, without taking into account suspensions or injuries and stuff like that might happen. So it might just be easier to go for Trossard straight away. And again, we can just quickly talk about the Brighton fixtures. I know we already mentioned them for Sanchez and Dunk, but I wouldn't worry about having to play. I mean, Trossard scored a hat-trick against Liverpool, right? So I'm not necessarily worried about playing him in any games. So Southampton away and Everton away are fine. Okay, Liverpool at home could be tricky, but unless they can get their act together, Liverpool haven't defended that well so far this season. And right now, given how everything's gone, Arsenal is probably a trickier game. And then it's Leicester away. They could have a double then. Then it's Bournemouth at home. Like, Trossard is a very, especially if they get the double in 21, Trossard is a very nice kind of long-term pick who doesn't cost that much at 7.1. So I know what people are going to say, should one extra fixture change your thinking that much? But it's definitely something we should be thinking about and should be considering. So it might be a case that I go back to, like, if I'm going to keep Salah and I'm going to keep Saka anyway and not go for Mason Mount, there's not many transfers that I'm pre-planning in this squad. So I may go for Rashford for 3 and then switch to Trossard. But I do think he's someone that you could just put in your squad straight away. So that's the midfield and defence. Let's take a look at the forwards. So the obvious one to get out of the way first of all is Erling Haaland. Unless he's injured, he's going to make the squad. So that's not really an issue. It's not something I need to think about. He's probably going to be my captain for Game Week 17 as well against Leeds away. I do keep looking at Salah though, thinking Aston Villa away, no Martinez in goal because of the World Cup. Could he be a better captain shout? Could he be a differential captain shout? Almost certainly. But I'll probably just default to the boring Haaland pick instead. One of the reasons that I'm kind of more okay about not going with De Bruyne is Haaland, because if they're both fit, I'm always going to captain Haaland over De Bruyne. So paying 12.6 million for someone that I'm probably never going to captain doesn't feel great. Now, I know a lot of people will say you're doing the same thing with Salah because most of the time you're going to captain Haaland. But if Haaland was to get injured, or maybe he was going to miss one game, and obviously we saw him miss a couple of games before the World Cup break, I would much rather captain Salah in most situations than Kevin De Bruyne. Obviously, if De Bruyne had Forest at home and Salah had Chelsea away or something like that, it might be different. But if the fixtures are similar, I'm always going to prefer captaining Salah. So although I might not captain him much because of Haaland, I think I prefer him as a backup over De Bruyne. The double gaming might change my thoughts on that later on, but right now it's another kind of plus for Salah, at least in my eyes. You may well disagree. I've got Mitrovic back in. I did sell him before the World Cup break. I know he's got those 4 yellow cards. I just don't see a huge amount of other options to go for a similar price. Obviously, you could go for Callum Wilson, for example, Tony as well. I know loads of people are talking about Tony possibly getting banned and stuff like that, but until it happens, I wouldn't worry a huge amount about it. I just wouldn't go for him anyway because of the fixtures and stuff. So Wilson is an option, but he costs more money. And I'm already talking about, again, White to Gabriel, maybe getting Edison in. There's already ways that I want to spend any money that I can get out of other positions. So I don't think Mitrovic is really up for conversation for me about getting rid of. I know there's the yellow card situation with him. I know this is Andreas, but if he gets the yellow card in game week 18, then Mitrovic's double in 19 will just be a single game week. And obviously, if he hasn't had the yellow card yet and you go into game week 19, will you captain him? Possibly not. I think the chance of him getting another yellow over the next 4 games is probably quite slim. I think the chances are he doesn't get it rather than he does. I'm sure he's going to be aware of it and stuff like that. But even if I get to game week 19 and he hasn't got it yet, I could just default to a Chelsea captain instead. Reece James, possibly Mason Mount if I end up going with him. So I think Mitrovic is fine. I think he's a solid pick, going to start every game. You don't need to worry about him. As long as he's not injured, you just play him against any team every week. And it's quite nice to have players like that, especially when they've got a double game week, right? And I'll say potential because of the yellow card situation. And also, for some people, they're probably considering, you know, Martial instead of Mitrovic, but I've got Martial as well. And again, that comes down to a money thing. I don't have more money to spend. Another player that I will consider, but I don't think I will go for, is Nketiah for Arsenal. And the problem is I'd have to drop one of White or possibly Gabriel, Martinelli and Saka. I think they're all really good options. Now, I still don't know how long Jesus is out for. I did tweet someone called Nighthawk FPL, who's an Arsenal fan. They said he could be out for like 5 to 8 weeks. So he's probably going to miss, you know, if Arsenal do get that double in 21, he's probably going to miss that at least. So Nketiah would probably play both of those games. But I just feel like Martinelli in particular, Saka on penalties, they're such solid picks. And I do like having an Arsenal defender as well. I don't think I want to go for Nketiah. So I'll probably go for Martial. My only concern is where do I go if he gets injured, and that is kind of likely because that's what happens with him. I guess the obvious answer without having more money in the bank is probably Solanke. And if you remember back to the double game week stuff that I talked about that Ben posted on Twitter, Brighton versus Bournemouth is a possibility. So Solanke could have a double game week. You'd know I'd be all over that. So that would probably be my get out. But while Martial is fit, and I know that might only be 1 or 2 game weeks, I'll probably just keep hold of him, and especially with the 3 fixtures that Man United have got. And I want to just confirm, because I did say before, in isolation, I think Rashford is a better option than Martial, and I do stand by that, but you can't take everything in isolation, right? Rashford would have to come in ahead of one of those 4 midfielders, whereas in the forward line, at least for 7 million or below, there's not too many other options that I have to go for. So Martial is kind of almost in by default because I don't really want to go for anyone else. Whereas with Rashford, it's competition against Trossard in the most part, who may have a double in 21. So there's all these things to think about. So this might change slightly before the deadline, but I think it's looking pretty good. If it does, I'll try and do a final thoughts video. You know I'm going to do a deadline stream on Boxing Day anyway, but that's how the team currently looks with all the information we have and the possible double game weeks. Let me know what you think in the comments below. There we go. Hopefully you enjoyed that one and found it useful. If you did, make sure to give it a like. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. I'm going to try and get at least one more video out before the Game Week 17 deadline. Obviously, we've got Christmas Eve and Christmas Day coming up very shortly, so it's going to get tricky to do more than one video. But if I can, I'm going to do final thoughts because my draft may change a little bit before the deadline. But also, I'm hoping we'll get some press conferences before the deadline that we can talk about, just in case there's information about player availability, fitness, injuries, and that kind of stuff. So keep an eye out for that. And obviously, don't forget to check out Fantasy5 if you haven't already. There is a link in the description below. It's free to enter. There's a £10,000 prize up for grabs, and obviously 2,500 if you live outside the UK and Ireland. All the links for that are in the description below. Otherwise, I will leave that video there. Thank you very much for watching. Give it a like, hit subscribe, and I'll catch you again soon.